Good morning. And we're excited about the opportunity to finish up our interviews this morning publicly. This search for a police chief started about 8 months ago, and we hired public sector search committee, Gary Peterson, who is here. Oh, Gary, if he'll step out and just wave. His company led the search for us. There were 21 applicants. Those applicants were boiled down to 11, then down to 6, and now down to 3. So the 3 finalists will be interviewed today. Our interviewer will be Deputy City Manager Kimiko Gilmore. Please give her a round of applause. Thank you. Our board members are here. Kathy Dean, will please stand and just kind of wave and let everyone see who you are. Don Wagner is here as well today. And Don Kramer is ill, and we ask her to please stay at home because COVID and all that is rampant, and so she is watching by way of television. Our board attorney, David Kenner, is here. Please give a round of applause as well. Holly Dodge is somewhere running around here. Bethany Ruoff, who is our administrative assistant for the board. And so we are excited about this opportunity to bring these candidates before you. At the end of the questions that our deputy city manager is going to ask, if you, as the public, wanted to ask a question, there was a station right out there. You just write your name down. We're going to have 3 public questions. At the end of each interview, you will have 60 seconds to ask a question, not make a statement, but ask a question. At the end of all of these interviews, there is a QR code that has been made available. It's out here. Gary has some stationed around. I think they're going to hold them in front of the cameras as well, where you will be able to give a opinion of how you felt about each candidate. So we're going to ask you to please fill those surveys out. And at our Tuesday meeting in closed session, we will have some final discussions about making a decision about a new police chief for Kansas City, Missouri. And so with that, we're going to get started, and our first public interview will take place with Acting Deputy Chief Stacy Graves, and Kimiko Gilmore is going to facilitate for us. Give her another round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop. I appreciate that. If I had that many rounds of applause at home, it would be a pleasant place to be at all times. Thank you all for allowing me to facilitate this interview. I do want to set a couple of ground rules, and really it's just one. This is an interview. So you all have all been, I'm sure, in job interviews. You would want to have the highest level of decorum at that job interview. So I'm asking the community, I'm asking the attendees here, if you would please refrain from any outbursts and you allow this interview to move on as you would in a personal interview that you are going through. So do I have everyone's agreement on that? Give yourselves a round of applause if I have your agreement on that. Thank you. When you have the opportunity, if you have an opportunity to ask a question, you will have 60 seconds total to ask the question. There will be no follow-ups, so after you ask your question, you can go back to your seat, so the candidate will have an opportunity to answer that question. Do we have an agreement on that ground rule? So without further delay, we will have our first candidate come to the So the questions came from the community. There were many questions that came through a portal that was set up for this purpose, and they were winnowed down into the questions that I have here. There are 10 questions that each candidate will be asked. And so you have the confidence, hopefully, that these questions have come from the city of Kansas City, Missouri residents and those that are interested in this process. Many of them were the same. There's not too many questions that you can ask, and so the Gary Peterson, Bishop Tolbert, and others winnowed those down into these 10 questions. So these are a summary of all the questions that came to us for this particular purpose. You're welcome. All right. Would you all please welcome Acting Deputy Chief Stacy Graves to the podium.
Good morning, Kansas City.
She said, hello, Kansas City. All right, Deputy Chief, I am going to give you 3 minutes to answer each question. Okay. As we discussed, all the questions for all the candidates that I ask will be exactly the same. You'll have 3 random questions from the community that will be asked, and those will be unique to each candidate. Okay? All right, so let's get into it. And I have a timer here, but I'm not sure, did you have one as well? Okay, 3 minutes for each question. Okay, Deputy Chief. What should the communities most affected by high violent crime expect if you are given this job?
The communities that are experiencing the highest volume of violent crime can expect a concerted effort from the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department that's going to look collaborative. It will look in such a way that we will be doing this together. My vision for a violent crime reduction strategy is more of a citywide effort, a citywide campaign, if you will, where the police department and all of our city entities, leaders, community works together to solve this problem that is a problem all throughout the United States in addressing and reducing violent crime. Part of what that looks like are a lot of things that we're doing already. You can talk about focused deterrence. Mm-hmm. You can talk about crime, data-driven approaches. You can talk about all of these buzzwords that I'm not going to bother you with in 3 minutes. Right. But what the citywide strategy, what that would do, we would all come together. We would work collaboratively together with our city entities. Let's talk about blight, abatement. We can get our city services in to do that. When we talk about our youth, we can work with our school districts to where we can have that opportunity to address youth and have those conversations of what's affecting them and their involvement in violent crime. They're our future. In addition to that, we just have so many opportunities to work together to really hone in and really dig in deep to the core issues of some of our violent crime.
Excellent, thank you. Next question. As Chief of Police in Kansas City, how would you boost morale in the department while maintaining positive community engagement?
Okay, well, can you repeat that for me one more time?
Absolutely.
I'm really glad you asked me that question, and I think I know exactly where to go with that.
As Chief of Police in Kansas City, how would you boost morale in the department while maintaining positive community engagement?
Well, to boost morale inside of the police department, right now we have to create an environment within the department internally that is one of open communication, one where our employees feel valued and supported and feel included in all of our promotion processes, our transfers, being a part of the solutions of the problems the opportunities that face the police department inside and out. So part of that would be to improve the culture inside of the police department. Some may say that an internal candidate that may be a challenge. I absolutely feel like that is an advantage for me. I know what the culture is inside of Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. I know what's working and I know what's not. So that would be one of the first things that I address to improve morale. And as that goes forward, working positively with the community, the men and women of the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department are a dedicated group that love their community, that come out day in, day out to serve the community. They want to do good. We all live in Kansas, well, some of us live in Kansas City, Missouri, and we want the best for our city. We have a lot of things on the horizon. We have a lot of exciting things coming. We have, I'm excited about the new airport. I don't know if anyone else is. We have the NFL draft coming. We have the World Cup. We are going to have the only women's soccer league stadium in the entire world right here in Kansas City. So, yes. So I feel like that's exciting, and I would want our police department to share in that excitement and to create an environment that's safe and really hone in with the community. Part of my 4-pillar plan for the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department is professionalism and service, community-focused approach, lead and promote collaboration with a results-oriented effort. So would love to go into all that, but I think I only have 45 minutes and 3 minutes on this question. So.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. That's excellent. How will you improve the fight against property crimes?
Yes, the fight against property crimes. So sometimes when police talk about volume crime, those are the crimes that occur the most, right? And volume crimes affect people personally, a lot more people personally, because there's a lot more incidents of volume crimes. Volume crimes are burglaries, stealings, your car getting broken into. So right now, because of short staffing, our property crimes was recently reorganized and kind of separated within the city. And what I mean by separated, there were like burglaries will be worked out of one station, auto thefts will be worked out of another station, where before all of our property crimes worked within the stations to address the property crimes that were in that station that occurred there. I do have a plan to review that. We do talk to our prosecutors about the importance of some of these offenders that are involved in property crimes. There's a small number of people that create the most numbers of property crime. And my plan is to work with the prosecutor's office to let people know that how important that is, because sometimes people will start out as property crimes. Somebody's breaking into a car in Westport, steals a gun, and then that escalates. Now they're doing a robbery. So it's important that the people that are involved in property crimes are stopped. And while this may not be necessarily the most popular topic, but Kansas City absolutely needs a city jail. And we need a city jail just to give a time out, at least to just remove them from our community, to just give them a time out to stop victimizing, specifically property crime.
Exactly. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Next question. How do you plan to deal with the mental health crises, specifically the 988 calls regarding children?
The mental health crisis. Right now, I am the deputy chief over the Patrol Bureau, and under my command is our CIT and our social services, our community interaction officers, and our CIT is a crisis intervention team. They are highly trained to address and assist those who are in mental crisis. It is my plan that every member on the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department, law enforcement that will be going out, and it's also open to our professional staff, that they will receive the training. That way everyone is trained to respond to a person in mental health crisis. In addition to that, I also want to address a little bit of the use of force involved, sometimes that unfortunately is involved in mental health situations. There is a program a training called ICAT that's out there that I have researched that other police departments have been involved in. And what ICAT does, I know you've probably heard where, police officers, we just want to go home safely. Well, edict or the motto for this ICAT is everyone goes home safely, right? So it's some of this training where you are responding to someone who could potentially be mental health crisis or any other kind of crisis situation, where whether they're unarmed or armed with anything other than a weapon, it teaches officers another set of skills to try to address and defuse, de-escalate that situation. And it has shown that it results in 26% less use of force.
Interesting.
I believe it was 36% less injuries, and obviously less complaints. So that's how I would address this with our calls for service. And when you talk about youth, I think we have a wonderful opportunity. We have our future that are in our schools right now, that we have an opportunity for the police department to introduce ourselves, to have conversations, to talk about conflict resolution, to talk about mental health, and to also recruit.
Yes.
I think we could recruit our future officers right there in high school. We have a lot of jobs that start out at 18 years old. Mm-hmm. So that's just some of the ways. I'm sorry, I only have 3 minutes.
That's okay.
We're going to keep on moving.
And we'll tell you when you can stop. So
Yes, ma'am.
You're
Okay.
fine. All right, next question, and this is number 5, so we're halfway there.
Okay.
What steps will you put in place to make sure that our police force is free from racism and sexism?
Okay. 2 things on that. I will not work for a racist organization. Second, I sure as a heck am not going to lead one. And part of that is getting in and ensuring, like, internally we are what we need to be.
Yes.
We're going to have these conversations. There's nothing that I'm scared to talk about. There's nothing that is off limits to have a conversation about. And I think we need to begin that by talking internally and ensuring that internally our members feel valued and supported and included in everything from promotions, transfers, and other job assignments. Another way that I feel like our police department can project that out and to reduce the perception of racism within the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department is I have plans to institute or bring along constitutional policing. And constitutional policing is where the officers enter each contact with our residents, visitors, with the mindset that they are protecting their constitutional rights. Where these contacts are put into the perspective of you are balancing public safety and someone's civil rights. That way, if there is a perceived issue of racism, I would hope that some of this training could potentially dispel that. And in addition, procedural justice training, which procedural justice, as some of you may know, has 4 pillars, I believe. You have fairness in process, you have transparency in actions, you have voice, where everyone gets a chance to tell their story, and you have impartiality in the decision making. And I believe that if our officers are part of this training, that I feel like the way that they communicate with the public on each one of their contacts, that could reduce the perception of racism in the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. When you talk about how I'm going to address it inside the police department, like I said, these things are going to be talked about. We're going to talk openly about it, and we will not tolerate acts of racism or sexism. And one of the things about sexism, I can tell you from a female law enforcement officer, that there are so many strong men on the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department that have supported me, have valued my input, and have mentored me.
Excellent, excellent, thank you. Thank you for that. So Deputy Chief, what do you feel are the top 3 priorities that need to be addressed in Kansas City if you become the next Chief of Police? So the top 3 priorities.
Top 3 priorities. We need to build some bridges. We've got to get into the community and the community to get in with us. And we are better together. We have got to come together. We have got to collaborate, have intentional conversations. As chief of police, I will, as part of being community focused, will ensure that our department structure reflects that of being focused on the community and our service to the community. In addition to that, I will have intentional quarterly meetings, and I know some people may not like this, inside the police department. I will have intentional quarterly meetings where me as a chief of police and the executive staff, along with officers, I would extend that to city council as well, to have these town hall type meetings every quarter hosted throughout the city. We should be sitting down at the table. We should be having these conversations before a critical incident happens. Yes. Second, we have got to address violent crime. We have got to come together. We have got to come together as a city to address violent crime. We have got to talk to our youth who are increasingly becoming involved in violent crime. When I see kids that are born in 2005, 2006, 2007 involved in violent crime, that makes my heart hurt. We have got to get in. We've got to talk to families. We've got to do this together. That's the only way that we can come out of this, Kansas City. We've got to make our city safer for ourselves, but also so we can make this a great place that people want to come, that people want to visit, that people want to raise their families. So the third,
Yes.
Recruiting and retention. There's only so much we can do if we don't have people to do it, right? And we want to recruit the right people who are invested in Kansas City and want to do good too. Part of recruiting is I would love, with the help of some of our friends, to come up with a campaign that highlights and elevates the image of Kansas City, where people want to come to Kansas City, people want to work at Kansas City, but specifically the KCPD. Like I said, we have so many great things on our horizon, and we want to bring in good candidates. Retention, that is a longer discussion.
Exactly.
But again, fixing the internal culture of the things the opportunities that we can take within the internal structure. I don't want to say that our culture is way off, but there are some improvements that we can make. So creating some of that within to help retain people, give people the responsibility and the support that their ideas, that their involvement, that what they want to do on the police department to help their community, give them the opportunity to do that. We need to allow our department members to be a part of that. We should be the highest paid police department in the region. We are the largest police department. We're the premier agency. While we all help each other in different large events that happen throughout our region, we are the premier agency, and we should be paid as such. We have some highly trained, great men and women on the police department.
Thank you.
So I heard my bell.
No, you're fine. I thought I heard the
Yeah.
timer, and I did hear the timer.
That's my wake-up alarm sound, so.
So, okay. 7th question. If appointed chief, what will you do to improve police and community relations?
I think I've talked about some of those, but I feel like we obviously have to have some intentional, on the schedule conversations where this is something that we regularly meet, we regularly get together, but also that we share in our wins and losses. Yeah. That's something I learned early on, probably from the media unit, that the mess up, fess up, move on. If something happens on the police department, that's unfortunate. But also, I want you to know that there's been some things said here in the past week about maybe the community not being as much involved in this process as they would have liked. And I hear you, and I see you, and I want you to know that through those listening sessions this past spring, I watched those. I printed out the full report. I've read those. I've studied those. I hear you. I see you. I know what you want from your police chief. I will be that front-facing communicator that this city wants, deserves, and needs. I will ensure that the perception of racism is addressed at my level as the chief of police. I will ensure that there's collaboration, open communication between the police department and the community. I want you to learn about us and our internal investigative processes. You should see how I print this off. The first couple pages are super crumpled because I've read it so many times, but I want you to know that I heard you. And I will continue to do that as chief of police. We will continue to have these conversations. I will welcome you into the police department, and please, I ask that you welcome me into your community meetings so that we can really actually get to know each other and start making a forward, positive movement together.
Excellent, thank you. As a candidate for chief, what do you believe is the driving force of homicides in Kansas City, and what strategies do you have to help reduce the homicide rate?
Lack of conflict resolution. I believe that is the main cause of homicides in our city, is the lack of conflict resolution. I think that should be something that is taught in our schools, and I'm sure that in some places it already is. And the unfortunate thing about homicides is that they're so hard, for the most part, they're so hard to predict because you don't know when someone is going to run into someone that they're having conflict with and intervene. But right now, the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department, along with in collaboration with the city and other leaders, our prosecutor's office, we're having these conversations. Every Wednesday, we're doing a shoot review where we go over, we talk about offenders, we go out, we meet with families, and we do risk for retaliations, advising people, hey, you know, there's a potential that you may be at risk for retaliation, that someone might come back, and then we're investigating another violent crime. The mayor's office has put together a Partnering for Peace, where a lot of our crime victims from non-fatal shootings and our families of homicide victims are coming together, and we are getting social services out to the families to try to get to some of the other core causes of violence, whether it be basic needs, food, funeral costs, all counseling, trauma-informed counseling, all of these things. But Kansas City, our homicides are still going. We had a homicide overnight last night. We have got to come together and really start to listen to each other and really talk. This is my plan, my outline that I gave to the Board of Police Commissioners in my first interview. I brought this with me because it's a reminder of all of the things that I want to do, that even though I know that I won't have the time to talk about this today, please know my heart. Please know that I'm invested in Kansas City and its safety. I can talk about actionable items, but I'm not sure that we have the time for that. But violent crime is at the top of my list. So building bridges, collaboration, violent crime strategy.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So do you believe that police and youth engagement are important? What plans do you have to build a stronger relationship between the police and the youth?
Yes, I think I've touched on youth a couple times in some of my answers. Our youth in Kansas City, I'm concerned. We have some wonderful.
That wasn't your bell.
Okay, I was like, that was quick. We have some just vibrant youth in our community. And like I said before, it concerns me so much that we have young people that are involved in violent crime. I see some of the videos and, the group violence that we have that are involving our youth. We have got to get down and really reach our youth, and I plan to do that through, we have the Police Athletic League. There are things and programs we have our school resource officers that really have a pulse on some of the problems going in, but those are just specific areas. To reach a broader group, I would love to work with our school districts and really get into the schools and have conversations, real conversations. And I'm not talking about the police talking at youth. Sure. I'm talking about the youth talking to police about what they need, what they're facing, how we can help them, how we can surround them with support. So those types of initiatives is what I have as a plan for our youth. I'm like I said, I would love to even get into our schools and recruit kids. Before they graduate at 18, we have so many professional positions that they can come on, and hopefully we can get them on board and they can be our future police officers.
That'll be great. Thank you. All right, so this is your last question. At what point in your law enforcement career did you decide you wanted to be a police chief? And what goals did you plan to achieve as chief?
Okay, so I'm going to answer this honestly, as I have all the others. So there were a couple times in my career I'd say I maybe thought about it, maybe not seriously, because I was always focused on what assignment I had at the time and the best job that I could do in those assignments. There were a couple times where I looked up at the police department and said, I would, like outside of headquarters, with the statue, with the the officer holding the baby, I was like, I can run this place someday. Yeah. I can do so much good as the chief of police. What was the second part of that question?
What goals did you plan to achieve as chief?
What goals? The goals as chief of police would be to improve the internal culture of the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. Like I said before, I don't want to keep repeating myself, but that everyone feels like they are valued, supported, and included. But I also want that to extend beyond the walls of KCPD, and that same feeling to be radiated out into our community for us to, bless you, for us to really be, to really embody the philosophy of community policing. My goals would be for the success, betterment, and safety of our city. That is my ultimate goal, and to ensure that everyone goes home safe at the end of the night.
Excellent. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Well, that is the conclusion of the police commissioner's questions. And now we will go into the community section of the interview. Bishop?
My name is Maya Cook, and I'm a leader with Incarcerated Casey. I was part of the initial planning of this meeting today, and during the planning, it was decided that there would be 4 listening sessions, and a police chief wouldn't be chosen without community input.
Excuse me, ma'am. Excuse me. Excuse me. Excuse me. Ma'am.
I'm going to ask we are going to choose 3 names. We are going to choose 3 names out of this We are going to choose 3 names. We are going to choose 3 names out of the bucket, and we are going to ask those 3 people whose names we choose to please come to the mic and ask the question. We are only going to recognize the 3 names.
If I could say something, sir, I don't mean to interrupt you, Commissioner Tolbert. I actually appreciate the voices that are being heard today. I can tell you. Okay. I can.
So we are going
I just want everyone. Okay. I just want everyone to hear them.
We are going to proceed with the process. We're going to proceed with the process. We're going to proceed with our process. We're going to proceed with our process. We're going to proceed
I do see
with
you.
our process.
I do hear you. Please give me a chance.
Only one of us can talk at a time, and our deputy city manager asked that we honor the process, and the process has been set in place.
I care about
So
you.
I'm
listening to you, and I hear you. I hear you, and I can hear you.
Let me say this, Deputy Chief,
Give me
Deputy
a
Chief
chance.
Graves.
Okay.
Now, we have had meetings with the public, with the different. We have had meetings with 7 to 12 different community groups, and the process has been postponed 2 or 3 times because it could not find a group of people who could get together and do all of those community meetings. That's why, as we push forward to at least involve the community, it came down to 1 meeting. So now we are at the public question portion. I'm going to ask my good friend, who is the president of the Ecumenical Leadership Group, if he will pick a name, call that name, and then you have 60 seconds to ask a question, not make a statement. Bishop Morrison.
Cheryl Ferguson.
To reiterate with the outburst, I was actually supposed to be at work today. I had to call in sick because I could not miss this event, this one-time event. What she was saying is absolutely true. The last time that we had a police chief selection, we had a multiple location process. As I look in the demographics of this room, I see that my race is not represented, and that's the problem that we have, is because that's the most interaction that the police have with the community. So there was no opportunity to make certain that Black, Indigenous people of color had the open door invitation to be here to help make this next election. And that is not on you, that is on you, that is on you, that is on you, that is on you.
there's no.
I hear you, Ms. Ferguson. I hear you.
The next name is Major Anthony G.E.
Hello, sir.
Hello, thank you very much for selecting me. In recent years, there's been a lot in the media about our KCPD's relationship with the Jackson County prosecutor. And I feel that that's a question that I'd like to hear you answer in terms of that relationship. How are you going to fix it? And moving forward, how should that look in terms of the prosecutor's office and KCPD, especially when it's cases involving officers? Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that question. I like it. I have already started working on that relationship with the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office. We've had at least one pretty long conversation. I will continue to work on that relationship, but in addition to that, it's my plan to have a commander, be a liaison to the prosecutor's office, not only to Jackson County, but also to our other county prosecutors' offices, to make sure that that relationship is what it should be. I can tell you we also have the unfortunate meetings sometimes where I'm in the patrol bureau, so I see all of our uniformed officers and whatnot, but when we have to enact that MOU where maybe we see like that there is some type of force used that is that we feel like is questionable, most oftentimes than not, it's reviewed by the prosecutor's office and our MOU with the federal agencies that review that, and usually it's not, but sometimes we just, out of caution, we do that. So please know that there is that layer, there is that agreement that, specifically when it comes to use of force. You did mention that we have had some officers charged. So all of that is true. That is something that is on my priority. I've already started to do that. And in addition to that, like I said, we're going to have a commander that is going to be a liaison with the prosecutor's office. And we're going to continue that open communication and that dialogue and that conversation. If there are any legal issues or any kind of use of force issues, let's say, that come up, we will be consulting with the prosecutor's office to talk about that, to whether there needs to be some changes implemented within KCPD as a recommendation from the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office. I'm working on that, Major L. I'm right there with you. I understand that that's somewhere that is one of the pressing issues, is ensuring that relationship with the Jackson County prosecutors, what it is and what it should be. So yes, sir, thank you for that question.
Ella Tomsick.
Hi.
I just generally want to know, why do you think you're better suited for this job as compared to the other candidates that are up for it?
Okay, thank you for that question.
I just want to know why she thinks she's better suited for this job as compared to other candidates.
I believe that I am the best candidate for this position. I am a born and raised Kansas City resident. I grew up in Kansas City, Kansas. I came over on the Missouri side, Kansas City, Missouri. I got I graduated with my associates from Penn Valley. I got my bachelor's from UMKC. I am committed. I'm raising my family here. I'm committed to the betterment and safety of this city. I have spent over 25 years with the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department readying me for this position. I know the concerns in the community. I want to hear more of the concerns in the community and us to work together to where we don't have situations like this. What happened just now is indicative of a larger problem that I am open to. I not only open to, I'm so willing to get in there and have these difficult conversations. I want to listen to the community. Part of my community focus plan is to start by listening. I've got to hear how the community feels about the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. You know, we should be asking people how they want to be policed. We should be of talking to people who feel like maybe some of the areas that they live in are over-policed or under-policed. I know Kansas City. I know the unique demographics in each one of our patrol division stations and pockets of our city, from the west side to the east side, Midtown, south, north of the river. I'm aware of all of that. I'm aware of the unique terrain and needs of each of those communities. I'm ready to step up and take that position. I'm ready to go. I'm here. I know the challenges that we face internally and externally, and I'm ready to get down and do that. And as the internal candidate, I'm here. I don't need a 90-day meet and greet tour. I can get working right away. That's why I feel like I'm the best candidate for the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department to be chief of police. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. That concludes our first interview. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Acting Deputy Chief Graves. Thank you, Kamiko. And so we'll take a few minutes to get our next candidate in. If you have not put your name in this bucket, there is some paper. We'll have some papers circulated. And the system is that at the end of the interview with City Manager Chief Kamiko Gilmore, that then there will be 3 names pulled and 3 questions from the public. So you can take a 5-minute, 6-minute bathroom break and stand up, stretch, move around. We'll bring our next candidate in. And so as I explained at the beginning of the last interview, this process started 8 months ago. We had 21 candidates that applied. We boiled it down to 11, then down to 6, and now we're down to the last 3 finalists. The process here is after Ms. Gilmore is finished with the official 10 questions, we will pull 3 names out of that little bucket there. You will be able to come up and ask your question, and we are just looking forward to having a police chief that serves this city and protects and serves everyone involved. And so with that, we're ready for Scott Ebner, and I think he is coming around the corner in just a few moments.
And as Scott Ebner comes, I do want to re-emphasize the fact that this is a job interview. And just as in your job interview, there were no shouts out and it's very quiet decorum, we would like to maintain that within this time. So thank you. And then also, as a reminder, you will not, when you are picked as a speaker for your question, it needs to be a question, and there will be no follow-up. So ask your question, and then you can go and remain in your seat so the candidate can answer your question. Okay. I feel like we need some walk-up music or something. And now we're going to bring to the stage retired Lieutenant Colonel Scott Ebner. Okay, sir. What we are going to do is we are going to go over 10 questions that were provided to me to ask you. These are the same 10 questions as all the other candidates will receive. There won't be any follow-up questions to these. Then after these 10 questions are finished, then we are going to offer the community 3 questions to ask. They'll have 60 seconds to ask that question. There will be no follow-ups, and then they will sit in their seats, and you will be able to answer their questions. Does that make sense?
It does, thank you.
Excellent. All right, so let's just get into it. So, as your first question, what should communities most affected by high violent crime expect if you are given this job?
Well, thank you. And first of all, thank you for having me. Thank you, the board, for bringing me here. I appreciate it. It is an honor to be considered as a finalist for Kansas City. What the community will expect from me is they're going to expect a professional who's compassionate, who's ethical, who has high integrity, but more importantly, cares about the community. Keeping violent crime down is extremely important. If you looked at what's going on in the country, but if you look at Kansas City in particular, since 2018, violent crime is up like 20%. You just broke, I believe, 162 or 160 homicides. It has to be safe. That's not safe for the community. And it's been continuing to go up for a while now. That's troubling to me as an outsider looking in. It means whatever's taking place in command here is not fixing the problem. And as we all heard before, if you could do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result, that's the definition of insanity. That needs to change. Me as an outsider coming in, I spent over 30 years in law enforcement. I started in 1991 as a police officer in Florida in the city police department. I left there in '95 and joined the state police. Throughout my career, we've worked on lowering crime, particularly violent crime. New Jersey, where I'm from, is a very populated state. There's over 9 million people in that state, and violent crime occurs in congested areas, just like it does in Kansas City here. So what you're going to get from me is you're going to get somebody who's engaged with the community and sets that vision and standard for everyone from the department down. It starts with the chief, and it's kept with everyone. Everyone's going to be held accountable to engage the community, from an officer that just hired,
That's okay.
to me, myself, as the chief. And it's going to be expected from every commander. I think that's very important. Like, I'm an outsider. I came in yesterday afternoon, I went to 2 divisions on my own, and I spent an hour and a half at each division, the East Division and the Central Division, and met with all the sergeants that were working, the patrol officers, ask them what they feel is most important here that they'd like to see the chief address. Where would they like to see improvements? How can we bridge that gap with the community? And the one thing they told me, and I think is important related to this question, is that they said they feel like they don't have time. They're going from call to call. They don't have time to engage the community the way they'd want to. And I think that's important because we need to address that. But you're going to get somebody who's committed to meeting from the community. There's over 240 neighborhoods that make up Kansas City. It's just not, the black community, the white community, Hispanic community, LGBT. No, I mean, I know where I live in my community, just on my one road alone, there's people from all demographics that live on that. We have to address every neighborhood and every position that they have when they feel is important to engagement for them.
Excellent, thank you. Next question. As Chief of Police in Kansas City, how would you boost morale in the department while maintaining a positive community engagement? Let me say that again. As Chief of Police in Kansas City, how would you boost morale in the department while maintaining positive community engagement?
Well, it takes place first with a clear vision. You need to come in. Officers, I've been doing this for over 30 years. It's a great profession because if you tell them what to do and you give them a clear direction, they're going to do it. That's why it's a paramilitary organization. It has to start immediately from the new chief when they come in, and I don't think that's been happening right now. I think it's kind of on hold and it needs to build up. But like I said, it started yesterday for me here. That's why I went to those two divisions to meet with those sergeants and officers. To me, that's extremely important. And they told me candidly what they felt were the important needs, but they also said, I asked them, I said, have you seen the chief? When's the last time you saw the chief at your division or a deputy chief? And none of them can tell me the last time they remember it. They have commanders that are there, the majors that work out of there, and the captains, but if your command is not meeting there regularly, part of my experience is I was a patrol commander as a major for the central portion of New Jersey. There was 6 stations under my command and 600 sworn members. Every week I was in a different station for hours on end, meeting with all the officers, getting their feedback, but also meeting with the community in 26 different municipalities where we represented them. That's cities and towns that we provided 100% of the police services because they don't have their own police department. That's extremely important. So how do you keep the morale? You keep it by being engaged. You let them know what's expected of them, but you hold yourself to the highest standards as well. That's extremely important. I spent 9 years of my career in internal affairs as a detective sergeant, a supervisor, and then as a commander. I've investigated every type of misconduct, alleged misconduct, and criminal conduct that you can think of. The state police was under a consent decree for 4 of those years that I was in internal affairs. So I know exactly what it's like. And to hold yourself to those standards, we just don't send anyone to internal affairs. It has to be somebody with a clean record. And that's one thing I'm happy to say. You probably heard things on me, but for over 30 years of my career, I've never been substantiated for any type of misconduct. I've never had a written reprimand, never been suspended, never been demoted. I think that's important because I can hold myself to the highest standards and expect that from people below me. But officers make mistakes. And what I mean by that is that training is the key to all this. Training is the key because right now you see the tension between the community and law enforcement. Building trust is important. We need to include the citizens, the community in our training. Most importantly is implicit bias training. For the last 3 years of my career, the academy fell underneath me. We implemented in those 3 years implicit bias training, de-escalation, and what I call simple is like step up and step in. If you're a bystander officer and someone is engaged in something, you have an obligation to intervene when you see something going the wrong way.
Yeah.
That's important.
Excellent, thank you. How will you improve the fight against property crimes?
Yes, well, if you look at the property crimes in Kansas City, they're more than double the national average. That's a statistic that no city should be proud of. You want to try and be under the national average in everything. That's not counting violent crime, that's over 400% more than the national average. But to stick to property crime, it's extremely important to know that every crime, when someone calls the police, you have to put yourself in their shoes. And the reason why I got into law enforcement is because at a very young age, my grandfather was the victim of a crime, and I saw my idol, who was a World War II vet. I'd never seen him get upset before in my life until that happened. And you know what he told me? He says, the police came, took a report, they're not going to do anything. That resonates with me. That happened when I was 12 years old, and I remember that to this day. So every time an officer is sent to a call, they need to know it's extremely important, whether it's a property crime or whether it's a violent crime, that they're a victim and they'll be treated as a victim with compassion and empathy, and we'll do everything we can to investigate it. We need to build collaboration and partnerships, because it's not just law enforcement going out there. There's a whole other entity with the courts, with the judicial system. We have to make sure that we work with them. So what I would do when I come in here, I would meet with the prosecutors, the district attorney, but also the federal partners that we have and other local partners around to address property crime issues. There's many ways to do it now. And I'm a big proponent of technology and innovation. And I think that's important, because if you include the community in this technology and innovation on how to combat crime, particularly property crime, and show them what you're doing, meaning taking that information. We can take their information if they're willing to sign up for a camera registry. Let's take that for example. So you have a Ring camera at your house. We can sign you up into a registry, and now we can use that to combat property crimes, packages being stolen off your front porch or your car being broken into. But we just don't take that information and just use it for our investigation. We take that information and we share it back with the community. They need to know what's going on. I know that there's statistics on the website here on crime and Crime Stop, but I've been in law enforcement for 30 years. It's difficult even for somebody like me to understand when you go through it. You need to make it digestible and more simple for the community to understand what's going on in their neighborhood, what's going on in a corresponding neighborhood. I know, like me, you might live in one part of the city and your relative lives in another, and you want to know what's going on over there. You have a vested interest in it. You're going to be traveling here to there. You want to make sure you're safe and your property is going to be safe. So what I would do if I was the police chief here, if I'm fortunate enough to be selected, is it's a priority. All crime is a priority. Everyone who's a victim needs to be treated as such and not victimized when an officer goes out and they say, well, this is just a property crime, there's nothing I can do about it. No. If I'm the chief and I find out that's the mentality, that's going to change. That's not how we treat people who are calling us. Everyone has a right to have that investigated and helped, especially for, trying to recover money for people. Part of my career as a detective, there was a financial aspect that I was dealing with, and you're trying to recover, and for victims, whether it's property crime, something stolen, their vehicle, their house was broken into. The most important thing someone will tell you that's stolen is maybe some jewelry to them. It might not be expensive, but it has a sentimental value to them. Exactly. And, photo albums, anything like that. I mean, these are things that, they're just like you and I treat everyone like that because that's how I started my career, wanting to help people like my grandfather.
Excellent. Thank you. Next question. How do you plan to deal with the mental health crisis, specifically the 988 calls regarding children?
It's an extremely important area of law enforcement right now, and it's not just a law enforcement responsibility. Mm-hmm. It's the way I look at it, it's a whole government responsibility and a whole community responsibility in essence. Juveniles, adults that are dealing with mental illness and crisis, it's not a crime. It can't be treated as such. Right now, we have more people in the community that are struggling with mental illness. They're struggling, especially because of the pandemic. I think even made it more of an issue when people couldn't come and feel the freedom that they normally had. We've seen it increase, especially with juveniles when they were learning from home. They didn't have that interaction with their friends like you and I had when we were growing up. That's extremely important for your development. How do we address that? To me, it started in 1991 when I became a police officer in Florida. I was 22 years old. I was very young, and I moved 1,100 miles away from where I grew up in New Jersey. And I was athletic. I used to box, so I got involved in activities with our youth to keep them off the streets to combat them being engaged in crime. But more importantly, it also helped them mentally. Some of them, many of them that had mental, challenges were coming from broken homes. They only had, one spouse who was working all the time, and they were out with their friends. And we were able to break that and actually increase school attendance, which was very important. People don't realize how important that is to not only help juveniles, but to get them back on track so they can better prepare themselves for the future, just like I would want for my children. And that's how I look at it. So we use social services and keep juveniles out of the system. What I mean is out of the criminal justice system. Whenever possible, that should be the last resort. That should be for violent crime, and even at that point, the whole idea is to try and get them out of that and reintegrate them into society and correct that behavior so they can be productive.
Excellent. Thank you. Next question. What steps will you put in place to make sure that our police force is free from racism and sexism? I'll repeat that. What steps will you put in place to make sure that our police force is free from racism and sexism?
Well, this is extremely important to me. Like I said, I spent 9 years of my career in internal affairs. I've investigated claims of racism, sexism, misogyny. You can go down the line, and I've investigated quite a few. I've investigated individuals accused of raping people. I mean, officers, to the point that I take it, personally. I want every officer throughout the country, not only just here, but wherever I worked, to be at the highest standards. We need to hold ourselves to the highest standards. How do you do that? You set an example, and you hold people accountable to that. It's extremely important to understand that that is how it'll be. It sets the tone when you're here. I understand that when complaints come here, but they're also sent here to be investigated by our own internal affairs investigators. We need to make sure those investigators are the highest trained and the most proficient. When I was in internal affairs, myself and 2 other investigators, we created the investigation course, the certified course you have to go through to be an internal investigator in the state of New Jersey. So I have even more experience, and I understand the dynamics of it. That needs to happen here, but they also need to know members need to feel free here. They need to feel like if they're being treated differently, that there's an avenue where they can report it to their command without any fear of retribution, and it'll make it all the way to the top. And how do you do that? You make that conduit from that complaint directly to the chief's office. This way, it doesn't get lost in translation. It comes to the chief's office, and then we let the command know where it came from, so they know what's going on under their command. And then it's addressed from that. I was a chief of staff for 2 years of an agency of over 4,000 members, 3,200 sworn. All of them fell under my command, but more importantly, internal affairs fell under my command, which was 45 full-time detectives and EEO investigations. I had to review every one of them at the end to find and approve how we were going to continue with that. I think it's very important because it shows that I have the experience. I also have the labor law experience that goes along with these when you want to try and discipline someone. Working with the unions, not against them, because the majority of cases that end up in misconduct, we come to a resolution through a plea agreement usually. It's not through a hearing. And that's the one great thing about being in internal affairs for so long, is that the mass majority of complaints that come in can usually be addressed or handled with training. We find out that they haven't been trained properly or they're deficient. There are severe cases of misconduct. Members shouldn't be in law enforcement, and they'll be rooted out. But we can't label everyone that way. That's important because when you take this serious, which I do, keeping that morale of the rest of the department, when you know officers are going out there every day and putting themselves in harm's way, are doing it for the betterment of everyone in the community. And that when someone does something wrong, it taints them. It used to drive me nuts when somebody did something wrong because I felt it brought the whole department down.
Thank you, sir. Great. Next question. What do you feel are the top 3 priorities that need to be addressed in Kansas City if you become the next chief of police?
Well, building that trust up with the community engagement, it has been frayed. But that goes hand in hand with reducing violent crime and crime reduction. If you look at the President's task force on policing that President Obama had, if you look at one of the 6 pillars, the 6th pillar is community policing and crime reduction. It's that one's together. That is extremely important to understand the relationship that we can put as many officers as we want in a certain area. It doesn't mean you're going to reduce crime. What will happen is you'll move the crime from one area of the community probably to another area. And that's extremely important to understand. Really good commanders that have been doing this a while and police executives understand that. You have to look at the driving factors behind it. Well, who are the facilitators? Why is it remaining there? Is someone facilitating this? And disrupt that. And ultimately, the ultimate goal is to prevent crime. That's our number 1 priority, is to prevent crime. It's not to arrest and apprehend people. You can't arrest your way out of any problem. And I don't believe in that. I think it's important for the community to know that. For me, it's important to understand that crime reduction, hand in hand with community engagement, but like I said, yesterday I went and met with sergeants and officers from 2 of the divisions for 3 hours I'm not from here. I wanted to get the unfettered opinion of officers, and I trust their opinion. And I told them I'm not going to tell anybody their name or anything, and the number one thing they told me is that we're losing officers at a drastic rate, and we can't hire anyone. That has to be addressed because that seeps into every other requirement or every other priority that you're going to have is staffing. Everyone knows if you, whatever job you do that you're sitting in this audience, if you go to work tomorrow or next week and you feel like you're not being appreciated and people don't care about what you're doing and that maybe you feel like you're not getting paid enough or you're not being trained enough, professionally developed to move along in your career, are you going to want to stay in that job? And that's what these officers told me yesterday. They don't feel like they're losing officers before 3 years now to 5 years. That never happened. I come from a department where we retain 95% of our officers until retirement. And we've hired over 500 in the past 3 years, even during the pandemic, in a residential academy where they have to stay there and they can't go home. So it can be done. I have the experience, and I want to bring that here.
Thank you for that. So, if you are appointed chief, what will you do to improve, and you talked a little bit about this, police and community relations?
Well, it's going to start with me. It's going to start with me being engaged and open and honest. The community, I read the report, the community's feedback report on everything. I think it's important. I read every page. I read every attachment. I read them several times because I wanted to know inside and out what the community felt here. I know there were 7 listening sessions, and I wasn't fortunate enough to be here for them. I would like to create those listening sessions after I'm a chief here, to give them that same ability to talk to their new chief, but to me to also talk to my commanders and officers to get their opinion when I'm here, because they're out on the front lines. They're going to hear stuff that maybe the community doesn't feel like telling me, or vice versa. I think it's important to get that from all sides. But also it's important is to deal with, the leadership, the Board of Commissioners, the city manager, the council members. We have to all work together. We can't be working against each other. That's the most important thing with law enforcement when especially look at chiefs of police and success. It used to be that the average chief of police lasted 3 to 5 years. It's below 2 years now. It's like 18 months. I mean, who in their right mind would want to come in? If you were going to take a job and you knew you were only going to be there for 18 months, do you think you could accomplish what you needed to? And the answer to that is no. You need everyone working together. And that's what I plan on when I come here, because I have an open mind. I want to say allegiance to anyone, and I'm going to use my experience to surround myself with the best and brightest. I think that's important. From all walks of life I've worked with in law enforcement, I'm extremely proud of it. But if you look at who I surrounded myself with, building very strong, diverse teams is important. And to give you those different perspectives, because you can only see so much. You need someone that can see things behind you and from the sides that can help you navigate this. And that's what I would call upon from the community. When I meet with them, hands-on, I'll meet with everyone that I can. I'm going to go to all 240 neighborhoods. It's going to take me a while, but I don't work from behind the desk very much. I like to be out and about, and I think that's important. I think I showed that yesterday when I went to the 2 districts without anyone asking me to do it. That's important because that's what I would want a new chief to do. Well, I'm sure the community would want the same thing. And you might get tired of seeing me because I'll invite myself to your meetings. You may tell me we want to talk first and then you can come in, and I'm fine with that. But the point is that you're going to know that you're going to have a partner that's willing to listen to you, work with you, and problem solve together. It's not going to be the police just coming up with a solution. We're going to do this together, collaboratively, because that's what works.
Excellent, thank you. So, this is a good question, and I am interested in your answer as someone that comes from outside of Kansas City. As a candidate for chief, what do you believe is the driving force of homicides in Kansas City, and what strategies do you have to help reduce the homicide rate?
Yes. Well, I'm very fortunate enough to come from an agency that believes in collaboration. And like I said, I was the chief of staff and I was the deputy superintendent of investigations. That's the largest investigative branch for the entire state of New Jersey. There's over 800 detectives there full time. And one of our main priorities is to combat violent crime, but more in particularly gun crime. So the driving force behind violent crime is the vast majority of those victims were the victim of a gun violence. I believe that through evidence, through data, and through tracking crime guns, not just a gun that someone owns, a crime gun, a gun that's used in a crime, that we can get a better overall idea of what's going on, meaning strategically, through NIBIN investigations, you've probably heard about them before. That's the National Integrated Ballistics Identification Network that was created by the ATF. It's a system. It started in 1999. We use it very well. And I know they have it here. But when you have NIBIN and you're not getting results for 14 days or you have 2-week backlog, it's not helpful. You've probably seen the shows on TV. What are they called? 48 hours. First 48 hours. You need those results in the first 48 hours so you can further your investigations. That's a fingerprint for that weapon. Whether it's a shell casing, the weapon itself, or the fragment, we can put into the system and we can track these crime guns to where they're used. Because I can tell you right now, a gun that's being used here in Kansas City, Missouri, could be used in the next state over, and it could be used in St. Louis. It's extremely important. That's what we found out there. And then we use this information and we share it with our own detectives and investigators, but you also share it with the law enforcement community, because that's why it's in the system, because now everyone can look at it. It's that fingerprint. What I found out yesterday is there's not an intelligence apparatus per se here. Like in New Jersey, we use something called InfoShare, where any officer who comes in contact with someone today of a crime, and we call it a quick debrief. You know, it's a field intelligence officer concept, and that every officer and detective is a field intelligence officer. Whatever victim or suspect that they come in contact with, they're going to ask critical questions to the best they can. If it's someone who's arrested, of course, it's post-Miranda. And then we take that information that's relevant and we put it into the system, so now we can connect the dots and look at it globally. Because right now, unless an officer is telling a detective, it's not being shared properly. And it needs to be put in the system. That's how it has to be an overall thing. So NIBIN is one. License plate readers is a very useful tool if it's used properly, because you could have license plate readers all over the city. If you're not analyzing that data in a timely manner and using it to further investigations in real-time status, it's not going to help violent crime. So what you're doing is you're painting a collaborative picture on how to address violent crime. What's the driving force of it? There's many factors. Is it gang violence? Is it a turf war that's going on? Is it a criminal element that's coming here because they feel safe that they can commit crime here, but they actually are from a different area? That's what, you know, ALPRs are helpful with. Where are these vehicles come from? Are they using stolen vehicles usually, you know, criminals? Or is it another vehicle or driving force behind it? There's shot spotter, and there's also hot spots. You've probably heard that before, and I know they probably tried it here. But have they tried it where it's been successful and did it exactly like that? And I would venture to say they probably deviated away from it, because you can implement any program you want. Unless you're doing it the way it was successful, it's probably not going to be as effective, because that's why it was effective where it was successful.
Yes.
But sharing this information, I think the most important thing that I can bring here is that I'm from a department that believes in collaboration. One of the biggest collaborations in the state, and I by no means created it. It was created by the previous superintendent of the state police over 10 years ago. It's called CoreStat.
Oh, that's you.
Can I finish or no?
There was a bunch of different ones. I'll let you finish your thought.
Yes, that's a collaborative effort with agencies that go across a corridor in northern New Jersey that is about half of the population. And we bring them together monthly. It's been happening for over 10 years, and we collaborate with each other and share information regarding violent crime so we can all reduce it together.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. And just for everyone out in the audience, if you have your cell phones off, if you can you please turn those off, because we're hearing a lot of different notices. We don't want to, I don't want to get that confused with the one here. Your next question: do you believe that police and youth engagement are important? What plans do you have to build stronger relationships between the police and the youth?
I'm a firm believer in that. Like I said, when I started in law enforcement in Florida when I was 22, I jumped in on it right away. Whether it was with the PAL, whether it was through youth sports, but in mentoring. Where I come from, you know, we have our officers engage in mentoring. How do you entice officers to do that? Well, we attribute it and we gave them credit towards promotion. They get an extra promotional point if they've been a mentor. And after we did that in 2 weeks, we had 400 people sign up. Now, granted, we had to whittle that back to a realistic number, but we assign our officers to mentors in schools. We don't pick them. We let the school administration. You tell us who you'd like to be mentored. And we follow that individual all the way through school. and to teach them life's lessons, to teach them that we're not an adversary. We're just like you. We went to school like you. We had our own problems. Like me, I came from a very difficult past where my dad became disabled, and we moved from home to home, and I didn't know, I used to go to work before school when I was in 7th grade all the way to graduation and work after school. I know what it's like. That's why it's near and dear to me. I think it's important for officers, and we could do that here. I would bring a mentorship program here just like that. But have the schools and the community pick who they'd like to be mentored with officers. You follow them all the way through school, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But even if we did it with 20 people and it works out with one person, is it not worth it? It's absolutely worth it, because you change the direction in the course of that youth. And it doesn't matter if they don't join law enforcement. That's not the goal of the mentor program. The goal of them is to help them move along and be a productive member of society where they care about people, and they're abiding by the laws, and they're going to be successful in their own right. And we do see some of them join law enforcement or go into the military. To me now, I don't just push law enforcement. Of course, you think that's what you would be pushing. No, I push social services, mental health professionals, because that's where we need a lot of assistance. That's the future of law enforcement, is best practices, not just sending a uniform officer out there, but also sending a mental health professional that can diffuse the situation because they don't look as adversarial because they're not in a uniform. That's one of the ways, is the Youth Mentor Program. I believe in that. There's obviously police explorer programs, an academy for a juvenile academy. We call it a Trooper Youth Week. It would be an Officer Youth Week. We should run at least 2 or 3 of them a year. And they're usually picked. We would have the faith-based leaders, the nonprofits, and the community. We would go out and meet with them. Who would you like to come to our youth academy? And then we train them of what happens. It kind of takes that veil down, that unknown, that if you don't know what happens and you're young, even when you're older, you're going to fill in those gaps yourself and say, well, that's what they do. And that's not what we do. We show them we're very professional and we care about people, and that we put other people's needs before our own, and that needs to be the tone here. So programs involving youth is near and dear to me. That's something that I will make sure that it's part of, I want to say, the culture of the department moving forward, because it has to be. How are you going to recruit and be successful at that here in Kansas City or abroad if you're not even willing to engage with youths here? It has to be a process that starts early on, and it has to continue. And every officer needs to know that they're part of the solution and not the problem.
Excellent. Thank you. Now, this is your last question, sir. You've done quite well, and we've gotten really far really quickly.
Oh.
Your last question: at what point in your law enforcement career did you decide you wanted to be a police chief, and what goals did you plan to achieve as chief?
Like I said, I started my career when I was 22, and I moved down to Florida because New Jersey wasn't hiring at the time. They were going through a budget crunch. But it was then. It was early on. After I got out of the academy and finished field training, I was fortunate enough to have a chief that was available. I think that's important, and most people don't realize, is that you could be the chief, and up here you have to make yourself available and approachable. And he was, and it really stuck with me. I'm like, wow, I really respect this individual. And then the next chief was the same way, but he was more geared towards juveniles and got us involved in the juvenile youth program and started our program that we had in the city there. And that's resonating with me. That's when I knew I wanted to be a police chief one day. So my professional goal is to be a police chief. I've gone through my career over 30 years, and in my last assignment, I was at a lieutenant colonel. That's the highest rank in the state police that you can be without being the colonel who's appointed by the governor. You're on the governor's cabinet there. It's a political position. I was at for over 5 years. I was a lieutenant colonel, so I've held positions as a chief of staff, many different areas. The director of the Fusion Center, investigations, deputy superintendent of investigations, and administration. I think that's one thing that will stand apart for me as opposed to other people that are, looking to become police chiefs, is that some have come through patrol or investigations or maybe administration or public information. I've done all of them for a long period of time and been very successful. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't. And I'm not done. I want to continue. I'm still young. I want to continue my law enforcement career as a chief. I told my colonel in the spring when I retired, I said I didn't want to be someone that was working, looking for another job. It's not fair to the people that work for you, who you're working with. They need to be able to move up in their career, because you're not 100% invested where you are right now if you're looking to work somewhere else. I mean, anyone can tell you that. I wasn't going to do that. So that's why I retired in the spring of this year, and I've been in other processes, you probably read. And they say they're national searches, but many times they'll do a national search and they hire the internal candidate, which has happened to me. And I understand that. I could just be myself and let you know who you're gonna get if I apply here. The last one I put in for Aurora didn't work out. We both had two really good finalists, but we didn't have the support of the city council. We met with each one of them privately, and they told us candidly that you two are not diverse enough. We're looking for a diverse candidate. I understand that. I mean, it is what it is. And then there was another one in Santa Fe. I don't know how they consider me a finalist. I didn't even get invited to Santa Fe. But I think they wanted a pool of candidates that they could say were their finalists. So I understand probably why the city did that. I don't necessarily agree with it. But I think you need to know about me. You said this is the last question?
Yes, it is.
All right, so I'll take the time to address other thing. I saw by the media that they said they reached out for me. They wanted a comment from me on 2 pending lawsuits. No one's ever reached out for me from the media. I just want to be clear about that. And the 2 pending lawsuits that are for practices, I was the chief of staff, and then I was in charge of administration the last 3 years. And the promotional system process falls underneath administration. So it's not just me who's named in these lawsuits, it's the whole command of the state police. I think it's important for you to know context there. I've never been disciplined. I never had a lawsuit that's been settled. And these I welcome. They're going to go through the normal course. But I know our process for the last 8 years has protected itself, meaning there's systems in places. Anybody that's been promoted has been promoted because we tier our members. Right. There could be a top tier of 3 people. They're all the same. And then the commanders make a recommendation all the way up to where I'm a lieutenant colonel, and then I have to make a recommendation to the colonel who has to approve it, and then it goes to the attorney general's office who makes the final decision. So those layers in there are what protect the promotional process of where I came from, and I'm not going to talk about them individually, but I think that the community needs to know that when you're in an agency that has over 4,000 members, when one person gets promoted and there's 2 other people in the tier, you're going to have 2 other people that aren't happy.
Exactly.
So thank you.
Thank you, sir. So now we have concluded the questions from the Board of Police Commissioners, and Bishop Tolbert will start the community questions.
We're going to pick 3 questions, or 3 people who will come up and ask your question. You have 60 seconds to ask a question.
And again, there will be no follow-ups to these questions, so after you ask your question, you can sit down and then the candidate will answer.
Janelle Johnson.
What do you plan to do about all the domestic violence going on in our city and people just getting away with it with long records of that?
Are you talking about just everyone that's involved in domestic violence, or it's not geared towards law enforcement, it's geared towards the community? I just want to clarify that.
Towards the community, everybody that's being victims of domestic violence, when the domestic abuser just gets away with it because the police department goes hand in hand with the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office.
Okay, I understand your question. Thank you. I think it's important, like I stressed earlier in my comments, victims are victims and they need to be treated as such. And we need to be able to give them assistance. Obviously, we're going to go in as law enforcement when we're called to do so. It's not a proactive thing where we are looking for domestics, although sometimes repeat offenders we can keep an eye on so we can try and, limit that from occurring in the future. But believe in victims. Number one thing is when I did many sexual assault investigations and domestic investigations when I was a police officer, a detective, and throughout my career, is to reassure them and to also give them in touch with social services to help them. They need to know that they're not going to be re-victimized because we're going to interview them, and we really need to get down to the bottom of it. Now, the perpetrators of domestic violence, I think it's extremely important because it's a vicious cycle that will continue to go on. In our job, if we're called upon it, we have to be the conduit. When we introduce ourselves, we need to break that cycle. How do we do that? Well, by documenting the evidence. And more importantly, by taking decisive action against perpetrators who commit domestic violence. But it's not just us. You can't arrest your way out of this. This has to be a collaborative effort with the prosecutor's office and the courts. There are some diversionary avenues for domestic violence that have worked throughout the country. I would be certainly willing to explore them here, but it wouldn't just be me. Would the Board of Commissioners be interested in doing that? Would we be interested in working with the prosecutor's office and the courts? Because the answer to that has to be yes. If you're not all going to work together, this vicious cycle will continue and will continue. And I think it's important because these victims, by the time we're getting called, have waited so long and they can't take it anymore. That's why they're calling us. This isn't the first incident that happened usually when the police are called. And the last thing we want is this person to go back and do it again to them. So I take it very seriously.
Next question comes from Brandon Smith.
Braden, are you here?
Braden Smith.
Must not be here.
Is that Carly? Carly Mitchell.
Hi, it's kind of a two-part question. So our current clearance rate is at 51% for homicides. So I'm wondering what you would do about that. And also, I know that our cold case department is not fully staffed. We're missing about 8 people. So I'm wondering your thoughts about both of those.
Well, the clearance rate is just unacceptable. I hate to say that, but it is what it is. It's not acceptable. When you see the violent crime going up, particularly homicides, you know, the serious violent crimes, aggravated sexual assaults, we can go right down the line, robbery. Clearance rates at 50% or below is just unacceptable. And as an outsider coming in, I think anyone that works here that's in a command position, you got to take a crucial look at yourself and look in the mirror and say, are you actually, what you're doing, is it working? And the answer to that, if it keeps going up, is not. So we need to adjust what we're doing. I would take what I've done and have experience with commanding in New Jersey and take that, like I explained, of how we would do that. But you have to staff it properly. You have to share information and intelligence. Information is developed into intelligence, which can further drive investigations. We need to use data to investigate these crimes effectively. We need to police smarter, not harder, as you heard. But one of the things that I always say is that if we're not collecting the dots, how are we ever gonna, if we're not gathering them, how can we connect them? So we gotta collect the dots if we're ever gonna connect them. And it's extremely important. It seems a simple concept, but it resonates with people. They understand that. Officers understand that. The public understands that. That's why we need all these different data sources that we need to use. When I was talking to officers yesterday, they told me that the officer in uniform doesn't really have that relationship with the detective, in that they're not entering information into an intelligence gathering system that can be analyzed. One of the important things is staffing. You need to be able to staff these things. I told the Board of Commissioners this when I interviewed with them in October, is that you need to be innovative in that. You just can't always hire a full-time employee. And I have very good experience, and we've done that where I come from, is that we've used what we call 944 employees. They're allowed to work 944 hours a year. A state employee is a part-time employee. They get no benefits, but they get a very good salary, meaning an hourly rate, which is about 18 hours a week. They can work 944 hours a year, so we can use them in the spring, fall, whenever, or we can use them weekly. And we found bringing civilians back, professional staff, and also officers who are retiring with that expertise, a detective who's retiring on knows gun violence or NIBIN or ballistics, and we bring them back where they can come in and we don't lose that ability, that technical expertise, which is so hard to garner. It takes years to do that, and we can keep them, and we attract a lot of people doing that. We have to be innovative of how we hire people. We can't always get a full-time employee, an FTE. Your numbers are dwindling. We need to supplement that. And not only could do that, we did it through temporary employees, through as well temps. But I bring that mindset here. That's how I would tackle these, because the clearance rate is not acceptable at 51%, ma'am. It needs to come down. It needs to go up, excuse me. We need to clear them at a much higher rate. Obviously, we want to reduce the amount of violent crime and prevent crime. That's the ultimate goal. As I read that the mayor said, I mean, you want homicides to be under 100. That would be my goal as well, without a doubt, to shoot for that. I think it will take years to get us there, a couple years, a few years, but that's going to be my task from day one, is to reduce violent crime. Yes, and work with everyone to do that. It has to take place. You have to feel safe when you're going to work, safe at home. Your family needs to feel safe. Why would someone want to start a business here or move here if they see violent crime going up? From 2018, you had 138 homicides, now you're over 162. I wouldn't want to come here unless I feel like I could tackle that and feel confident working with you, and to be able to accept criticism. If you feel I'm not doing something right to address that violent crime, you need to tell me, and we're going to adjust and work together to do it.
Our next question comes from Alvin Brooks. I promise you this was innocent too.
I was watching them.
Thank you very much, and I don't want you to think it's a trick that I got called upon. Just maybe they went alphabetically. I'm a little surprised of the 10 questions that were posed that none of the board members asked this question. What is community policing, and how is it enacted in any major city? Community policing.
Yes. Well, I think that's an important question. It's nice to meet you, Mr. Brooks. You seem to be a fan favorite here, so glad I got to meet you. But community policing, I think some people misconstrue community policing with community relations. I think community relations is important for every department. You have to have that relationship with the community. Community policing is actually sitting down with the community and problem solving together, coming up with solutions to these problems together, not just law enforcement, because what works in one part of the community, like I said, there's 240 neighborhoods in the city of Kansas City. It's a very diverse and broad city. We need to work with people in those different neighborhoods to what works for their neighborhood, and develop, problem-solving techniques to address the problems in those areas. That's the basis. In every city in the United States, if a chief is coming in and doesn't think that community policing is the most important thing, that's one of the things I said when I first came here, is they're building that trust with the community. If the community doesn't feel safe that they can come talk to you, or feel like what you're telling them, you're telling the police, is going to be taken seriously, we're at a standstill, because the community is their eyes and ears of what's going on. The neighborhoods are. And, I don't know what neighborhood you in, but I guarantee you know the people in your neighborhood and who's involved in what and who's doing what. That's the basis of community policing, and how it works best with law enforcement, is that we need to be able to assign officers, if we can, to specific areas of that community, so the community members like yourself are familiar with that officer. It's twofold, because now the officer is someone that you know firsthand. You're going to know as Scott's in the area. He's going to be patrolling over here. I know he really cares. He's going to do whatever he can to help me, and he's going to be honest and tell me what he can't do and why. And then that's when you can come to the higher ups, and we need to give them what they need to succeed. Police officers, that's what commanders are supposed to do. That's what leaders are supposed to do, and that's what the chief will do. But twofold. The second fold is that officers, like every other profession, take pride in what they do. If my area of responsibility is my area of responsibility, I'm going to make sure I do everything I can to reduce crime in an area. Why? Because now it's a reflection of me. I'm there all the time. These are the people I represent, because I really take that to heart. That's the twofold by assigning officers to specific areas of a community. And, sometimes we have to rotate them, because there's different parts of the area, you're so busy you can't stay in the community because you're out. And that was one of the things the officers told me yesterday, sir, and I think it's important for you to know that, is that they felt they didn't have the time to interact with the community as much as they would, because they're going from call to call to call. Because when that call comes in, we need to get police there, and we need to get them there quickly.
Bishop, if I just might, I thank you, sir. True, the model for community policing is that, as you said, assign officers, especially they don't answer calls, any domestic call, only if there's an assist the officer call. The only time that they respond. And you get volunteers to do that in a specific area. In our area, there's 6 patrol divisions, you probably know. The most violent one is East Patrol.
That's what I was here yesterday.
And what you do is you assign officers who want working there, bicycle, cars, and that they know everything that goes. They don't make any other kind of calls. That's the model for community policing. And I share that not only with you, sir, I wish I could have also shared it with the previous person as well as the one that follows, and I probably won't get pulled again. But the board should know that they should be asking candidates, what is your model for community policing? That's the question.
We asked those questions in the interviews. These questions that she's asking and that people are asking here came from the community. They are not from us. But I understand your concern, but I want you to know that these 10 questions came from the community, not from the
Misunderstood. I guess I misunderstood what was said here. I thought, but then I think the board then should have said, as one of those questions that in one, what is community policing, so that this audience, so that the community will know. You knowing is one thing, but the community knowing what is community policing, and that's what's important.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. And
If I may, I'd like to say one thing on that, is that without getting into specific questions I was asked, I will tell you this, that when I met with the Board of Commissioners in an interview, which I thought was a very good interview, their questions were extremely relevant to what your concerns are, sir, and what everyone was asking here. It's extremely important that I feel like I could work really well with them, because I do feel they have the best interests of the community at heart, and have different perspectives is extremely important. So I want you to know that. I'm not just saying that. Like I said, I'm an outsider. I'm being completely objective, and I'm telling you that because that's what I believe.
thank you, Lieutenant Ebner, and thank you, City Manager
Well done.
Nico Gilmore. We're going to take another break, and we will have our last candidate will come up in about 5 or 6 minutes. Your name? this part. Testing 1, 2. And this battery is about out. So if you have some extra batteries.
Check me out. Got it.
Oh, okay, good.
Tutu.
All right, we are going to come together for our last interview. Thank you for being here this morning, which is going to be afternoon in about 4 minutes. If you will head toward your seat as Deputy City Manager, I keep wanting to call her Deputy Chief, but as Deputy City Manager, Kamiko Gilmore has expressed, this is the final interview process. As I've told the other groups since early this morning, we started out with 21 candidates that were brought to us by our search committee, Gary Peterson, Public Sector Search Committee, and we boiled it down to about 11, then we boiled it down to 6. We interviewed those 6. And these are the final 3 candidates. I have been impressed with both of the candidates thus far. And so our last candidate that is coming is DeSean Beaufort. Our Deputy City Manager is going to give us some outlines for how this interview will go, as well as the public questions on the end. And again, thank you all for being here. I'm Mark Tolbert, Chairman of the Police Commission Board.
There you go. So as with the others, I just wanted to emphasize once again that this is a job interview. And just as when you go to your job interviews, you would not want those to be disturbed by outbursts and what have you. We want to give this process a high level of decorum, and so we can get through this with the utmost respect for the candidates. Also, the questions will be we'll give them approximately 3 minutes to move through those questions, and then you'll hear an alarm. Please turn off your cell phones and alarms so we don't get those mixed up in the process. Next, we will have the community questions. The community questions will be pulled from this lovely plastic box, and then that person should come on up to the microphone, ask the questions, and then remember there will be no follow-ups. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. If we could have our next candidate, Inspector DeSean Beaufort, come to the stage. Inspector Beaufort, good to meet you.
Good to meet you. How are you? Thanks for having me. Good afternoon, Kansas City. That's the best y'all have?
Inspector Beaufort, we will go forth with 10 questions that come from the police commissioners and the community. Mm-hmm. And after that, then we will go forth with the community questions. There will be 3 questions from the audience, and those will be picked by Bishop Tolbert. So we'll go ahead and get right into it.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So first question, what should communities most affected by high violent crime expect if you are given this job?
So first and foremost, good afternoon, everybody, once again. When you talk about communities that are affected by violent crime, what you can expect from me is first and foremost accountability. I don't think any police department in America that does not have a chief that is going to be accountable for the crime that is going on is going to be successful. But in addition to that, you also have to have a community relationship. No chief is going to be successful without it. You're going to lose because it's the community first and foremost that knows what's going on in the places that they live. So you have to be accountable first and foremost, but you have to also have that relationship that's going to have that trust. And when I speak about accountability, it's not just from my aspect as the chief, but it's also the commanders that are working for me. I think it's very important for the commanders that are working for me and alongside me to have that accountability as well. The commanders that are out in the divisions that are servicing you, you should know who they are. If you don't know who they are by now, that's a problem. And those are some of the things that I will be bringing to the table, is that level of accountability, but also a focus on intelligence-led policing. When it comes to the crime that's going on, specifically as it relates to the gun violence. It's something I'm very used to. Being from Philadelphia, we are plagued with gun violence. We have 482 homicides this year alone, so far. So gun violence is something that is just plaguing us. And it's countrywide, it's nationwide, and it's something that we all have to deal with, but it's something that the community has to work alongside the police department. But the police department as well has to have an open ear to listen to what the community has to say.
Excellent. Thank you. As Chief of Police in Kansas City, how would you boost morale in the department while maintaining positive community engagement?
So when you talk about boosting morale within the agency, that's important. Specifically as it relates to policing today. I don't think there's been any time in recent memory where policing has been placed on a precipice as it has been specifically as it relates to George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. Even in Philadelphia, we had a situation, Walter Wallace. And these last 2 years, on top of dealing with a pandemic, has been very stressful for police officers. One of the things police officers are going through is a form of PTSD. Whether we want to admit it or not, the job is not easy. We are doing things that go far beyond just normal policing. And we have to, as an agency, understand that, but also be there for our officers to get them the help that they need. But we also have to commend our officers for the outstanding work that they do. I don't think we do that enough. In police agencies all across the country, we allow the media to tell our story, and we don't do a very good job telling our own story about the great things that our officers are doing. And when I look at the men and women of the KCPD, they're doing outstanding things. You know, it's not that they're bad police officers or this agency is a horrible agency. It's just an agency that, in addition to the 18,000 other police departments across the country, are battling tough situations. So I think ensuring that officers know that they're cared about, that we are here for them, that I am a leader, that I want to hear what you have to say. You're not just going to be treated as a cog in a wheel. I think nobody wants to be treated that way. You want to understand that, or you want to be made to feel as though you have a voice in your agency, but also the community aspect of it as well. I think our officers have to understand and empathize with the people that they are serving. When you take a step back and you look at it, and you say, you know what, I'm servicing a community that needs help from time to time. But when they don't need help, am I stopping to say hi? But we also have to give our officers the opportunity to be able to do that. We don't, because of the 911 call system. Our officers don't have time to actually engage. Those things are important, but I think working hand in hand with the community, I think we can get to a level of where we need to be.
Excellent, thank you. How will you improve the fight against property crimes?
So when you talk about property crime, it's you don't hear that too often anymore. And that's because of the gun violence that's going on. Most departments now are really focusing on gun violence. And some of those crimes have gone by the wayside in terms of our attention. We really haven't been focusing as we need to be. I think that relates first and foremost to informing homeowners some of the things that they all need to do, that we can work together with, ensuring that they're knowledgeable about what's going on around them. So if you don't communicate as an agency with those people that you're servicing, if you don't let them know some of the things that are going on within their area, putting out those notices and communicating with some of those community leaders so that they can get the word out, you're going to have that increase in crime. But there's also an accountability level that extends beyond the police department. And what I mean by that is there has to be some prosecution when it goes along with making arrests. for offenders who are committing these types of crimes. I think far too often a lot of the district attorneys nationwide consider it not as hard of a crime. But one of the worst things, and it's some people may think this is crazy, one of the worst things is to have your home burglarized. You feel violated.
Yes.
You know, somebody can steal your car, you know, take your flower pot, but somebody comes into your home and burglarizes your home, that's a problem.
Yes.
And you feel like something has been taken from you, and I heard the alarm, I'm sorry. But those are the things that there has to be an accountability from every aspect. Education, arrest, and prosecution that sticks. So those are the things that need to be done.
Thank you. Thank you. Next question. How do you plan to deal with the mental health crisis, specifically the 988 calls regarding children?
So specifically as it deals to the mental health crisis, it's a real one. As it relates to children specifically, but also even extending beyond that. And I think COVID has really brought about that to the forefront of everybody's mind. When it comes to dealing with that, you have to have officers that are crisis trained, CIT trained officers that are going to intervene. You want to make sure that all of your officers are actually incorporated into that process as well. But you also need to have other agencies along with the police department. I cannot stress to you, we cannot just rely on the police department to conquer an issue that goes beyond what their servicing capabilities are. Meeting young people at their needs is very important, but it goes beyond policing. We have to have behavioral experts engaging in the process, working alongside us within the agency. When officers are out at specific locations and they identify areas of need for these young people, we need to be able to rely on the person that we make the call to and say, hey, listen, I was out at this location. This does not look right. When I make this call, I need to know that you're going to go out there. Not a month later, not 2 months later, the next day, if not that day. So everyone has to be held to that same standard of meeting those needs. The mental health issue is real, and it's something that, you know, we're affected by in policing, but also in the community as well. And I think that if we understand that, if we work together in partnership with that, with those behavioral experts, we'll be able to combat some of the challenges that these officers are seeing as they go out conducting their day-to-day duties.
Great, thank you. So what steps will you put in place to make sure that our police force is free from racism and sexism?
So one of the things that we have to understand is whether something is perceived or it is real. If it's just a perception, that means it's real. So let's understand what's going on within this agency. So you have a active Department of Justice investigation going on. Now, there hasn't been any declarations yet, but remember when I said if it's perceived, that means it's a problem. So if you have something like that that's going on within the agency, it doesn't mean that the agency is bad, but some of its practices may need to be changed. That's where the accountability aspect comes into it as the leader. So as the leader, you have to be able to recognize and say, you know what, we got a problem, and we have to fix it. And if you are not willing to do that, these are the issues that you're going to have. You have great men and women that are in this police agency, but the officers are going to take up the persona of the leader. So if I have a leader that does not care, then I'm going to have officers that don't care. So understanding that, you have to have methods in place that are going to be, in accordance with procedural justice, but also diversity, equity, and inclusive efforts that are going to take place. One thing I will tell you, I do know that Kansas City has a diversity, equity, and inclusion officer for the city,
Yes.
but for me, that's not good enough. If I'm the leader of this agency, I want a diversity, equity, and inclusive person as a member of my executive staff. Because in order for us to be able to make changes, you have to have somebody who is solely focused on that organization as a whole to say, listen, these practices are wrong, we have to get rid of them. I think that's how you start to move forward. And I cannot stress to you enough, it's not a bad agency. It's just an agency that is at a precipice. That's the way that I like to look at it. We're at a precipice. In policing and as an agency, we have to make changes. Some changes are hard. Some changes we're not going to like, but you have to make them. So those are the things that if you want to make changes within an agency, because if it's perceived, to me that means it's real. We have to have diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts involved within that agency. That's also how you get to win back your community. Because if they see that you're making those necessary changes and you call it out, you broadcast it, you let them know what we're doing here, and these are the changes that we're making, then you'll start to gain trust. Until you do that, we're going to go round and round on the merry-go-round because these changes are not being made.
Thank you for that. Next question. What do you feel are the top 3 priorities that need to be addressed in Kansas City if you become the next chief of police?
So, just like other cities, gun violence, number 1. That's important. Also, community engagement, and also just a restoration of public trust. Those things are very important. I mean, there are a number of things that could be mentioned, but everybody is concerned about gun violence because there are too many guns on the street. And it's not just Kansas City, it's in Philadelphia, it's in Baltimore, it's everywhere. There are too many guns on the street, and there are too many guns in the hands of our young people. And that's something that we have to work on. And I think those things are very important. So when our officers are out making great arrests, which they do, when they're out there making great arrests and they're getting guns off the street and they're doing things the right way, we have to make sure that from a prosecution standpoint that arrest sticks. Now, don't get me wrong. Arrests will never solve your problem, you know, because a lot of the issues go far beyond that. But I think ensuring that we're tackling gun violence, utilizing intelligence-led policing in doing so, ensuring that we're having community engagement with the people that we're servicing. If we don't have that, you're not going to be successful, as I stated earlier, ensuring that we're having those meetings that, you know, they know that they have a chief that they can actually see. I think that's very important. And just restoring public trust, because like I said, this is not a bad agency. It's just an agency at a precipice.
Excellent. So if appointed chief, what will you do to improve police and community relations?
So one of the things that is very important, or the way that I was taught as a commander is, and I keep repeating myself, but it's true, I'm not lying to you. You cannot be successful without talking to the people that you service.
Sure.
I think that for me, one of the reasons, well, I can tell you why I got into policing. I got into policing because I wanted people to understand that it can be done the right way, because I saw what policing was like when it was done by officers who did not do it the right way. I've had police guns in my face. You know, so those things tend to affect you as you come up. So when you understand that those are changes that can be made, I got into policing at the age of 19, and I've been doing it ever since. But the reason why I've been pretty much successful in it is because I haven't been afraid to have a relationship with the community, letting them know what's going on in your neighborhood, who's committing the crime. You don't have to broadcast it, but what are we doing? But it's also not just with the adults in the community, and this is what we tend to forget about. It's young people. You know, one of the questions that I asked one of the young people in the neighborhood that I was servicing, it was 3 young guys, and I asked them, I said, if I could give you a job and it's $80,000 a year you're getting paid, you'll never be rich, but you can take care of your mom, you can take care of your family, you can have a nice life. Would you do it? And the young people were like, oh, yeah, we would do it. I said, well, what do you think we're doing in policing? And they said, no, we can't do it. Yeah. That's a problem. Because they already have it ingrained in their head that we are not doing it the right way. And that's the perception that we need to change. So understanding that accountability is big for me, understanding that community engagement is big for me, doing things that are not just for a holiday. You know, within Philadelphia, one of the things that districts are responsible for is to It's an active question every month. What are you doing for your community? And I'm not saying that Philadelphia is the best and we're the greatest, but I'm saying some of the things are standard that I know that I would be bringing here. It's not, what are you just doing on Thanksgiving? What are you doing on Christmas for your community? What are you doing this month? As the commander, what are you doing? Do they know who you are? Or is it just a 9-to-5 job for you? That determines what type of leader you're going to have. So those are the changes that are important to me.
Excellent. So as a candidate for chief, what do you believe is the driving force of homicides in Kansas City? And what strategies do you have to help reduce the homicide rate?
So for me, it's two things. One of the things is a lack of value. If you have a mindset that you do not value life, you're going to do whatever you can do in the time that you have. And it's a problem with our young people, and it's not just exclusive here. I know the question pertains to Kansas City itself, but the same issues that are going on in Kansas City with gun violence is the same thing going on in Philadelphia. Young people do not think that they are going to live long. And when you don't think that you're going to live long, you're going to do whatever you can do while I'm here. And if that is pillage and plunder for the time being to get what I want, then that's what they're going to do. We have to change that mindset, but it takes more than the police to be able to do that. And also, we have to increase more opportunities for our young people. One of the things that's important is that I look out into this crowd and I see all adults, for the most part. I can't really see too far because the lights are bright, but it's all adults. Where are the young people? Why is that? That's a problem. So one of the things that we will have to do as an agency is just like we have a board of commissioners for the department. Can we start a youth advisory council for the department where each section of the city has a bunch of young people whose voices are going to be heard, who may speak for the young people in that specific area. So those things are important. And so when you talk about lack of opportunity, lack of value, we have to fix that narrative. But I can promise you, it will not be the police department who solves the problem. And this is where the community engagement aspect comes into place. The people of Kansas City need to know that whether it's me, whether it's a commander that is servicing them, whether it's the good men and women of the Kansas City Police Department, that they are going to have their needs met. And there are good officers here. They are doing great work. We have to believe in them. If we continue to hear just negative aspects of our police department, it starts to seep in your psyche. The officers that are servicing you start to believe that you don't care. And it's something that we have to fix within the agency and also within the community as a whole in order to ensure that Kansas City is where we want it to be in terms of one of the best cities in the country.
Thank you. So do you believe that police and youth engagement is important? You talked about that a little bit. What plans do you have to build a stronger relationship between the police and youth?
Well, I got a little ahead of your question, but just ensuring that the young people have a voice. Far too often, if young people feel as though they're not heard, they're gonna do whatever they want to do. And I think that we have to have an agency that understands that, and that, not to say that the men and women are not doing anything, but I think there has to be a concerted effort into ensuring that they're heard, because I know that you have school resource officers that are doing great things. I know that you have PAL and different community programs that are doing great things, but there has to be a focused effort in ensuring that their voices are heard and that they're going to communicate that message back to their peers, because they're the voice, whether we like it or not. They're the ones that really dictate the success of the city. So I think that if you have that concerted effort focusing on young people, letting them know that, we're here for you. It's not all bad. We can be successful. We hear you. What are some of the things that you would like changed within, the agency, the city itself as a whole? We need to be able to let them know that they have a voice, they can speak up about it, but we also have to actually do it. So.
Thank you. Now, Inspector, this is your last question. And after that, we will go into the community questions, just as a reminder. So at what point in your law enforcement career did you decide you wanted to be a police chief? And what goals did you plan to achieve as chief? So
I guess I answered that a little earlier. It was 19, and I wanted it to be different. I wanted it to be something that people in my community knew. Well, I know Sean, and I know he's going to do it the right way. And for my 26-year career, it's been pretty much done the right way. I've gained a lot of community trust. I've tried to be the best officer that I can be, servicing the people of Philadelphia. But most importantly for me, it's always been about fairness and understanding that I always like to remember everybody has a bad day. Just because you're arresting somebody or you're encountering somebody at that particular moment does not mean that they're bad people. And I feel as though I've done it the right way to the point where my 23-year-old son is now a police officer.
Very good.
And for me, I try to impart on him, I say, son, it's like Wile E. Coyote and the sheepdog. He says, what do you mean, Dad? I said, do you remember the cartoon when Wile E. Coyote and the sheepdog clocked in at the same time? That's the cop and the criminal. At 5 o'clock, Wile E. Coyote and the sheepdog punched back out at 5 o'clock. It's never personal. The criminal's job is to commit crime. The men and women of the police department's job is to make arrests and do the things that we need to do, but do it in the right way. We have to understand it's never personal. And I think if we, as a policing community, understand that, then we can get the outcomes that we need to see. And don't get me wrong, I know it's not all pie in the sky,
Sure.
but I think if we have that mentality, we can get to where we need to be. Because in policing, you have to remember, you are dealing with mostly alpha personalities.
Yes.
And people don't understand that.
Right.
If it were all betas, it'd be all good. But it's mostly alpha personalities where people don't like to be told what to do. No one likes to be told what to do.
Right.
And especially when you're having that bad situation, you don't like to be told what to do.
Right.
But as long as we do it with a level of respect, dignity, and professionalism that I will demand as a leader, then we can do it the right way. Are we going to make mistakes? Yes, we are. Is it going to be good all the time? No, it's not. But that's where, as the leader, I say, listen, we made a mistake. We didn't do it the right way, but I can promise you we will correct it. Those are the things where the accountability level comes into play. That's what I believe in. I do not believe in lying to the community. It's not what I'm about, because the God I serve, I gotta lay down with that.
Yeah.
And I told the community, the board of commissioners, the very same thing. I told them, if you want somebody that is going to lie to the community, don't hire me. I don't have a problem with that.
Right.
I think if we talk about gaining community trust, you got to be honest. Yeah. Policing is not going to be pretty all the time. It's not going to be the way that you want it all the time. Sometimes officers are going to have to make the hard decisions in less than 2 seconds. It's the truth. It's not always going to be right. But does that mean that that officer came out with the intention that day to take a life? No officer does that. I can tell you that. No officer comes to work to say, I want to take a life today. But they have to live with the decisions that they make, whether they're right or whether they're wrong. And what they have to have is a leader that stands by them. And when they're right, I will tell them they're right. When they're wrong, we will work through it, but you will know you're wrong.
Thank you. All right, sir, that was the last of the questions here, and now we will open it up to the community.
I'm going to ask Bishop Morrison if he will choose a name. He'll call your name, and you can come up. You have 60 seconds to ask a question.
The next question will come from Griffin Peoples.
Good afternoon to you and everyone here.
Good afternoon, sir.
I propose a question and a thesis. Trust leading to truth, leading to facts. The facts is that in regards to the violence in the community of Kansas City, I agree with the term lack of conflict resolution. Building bridges, improving the internal atmosphere, whole community involvement, better collaboration, community policing, relations, involvement, and engagement. And lastly, the perception, right or wrong. What do you feel that you could do as the theory that you would be the chief of police of Kansas City, Missouri, to have control to, I feel, the stem of the root of the violence is too many guns?
So as I stated earlier, you're absolutely right. It's too many guns. There has to be a hand-in-hand. So you all are doing the same thing that we're doing in Philadelphia when it comes to focused deterrence. We're doing the same thing because this method is going on across the country. You have to have a focused and concerted effort to getting rid of your most violent offenders. So I'll give you an example. Where I was at as a divisional inspector prior to my assignment now, we had the year before, we had 125 homicides in my division, a small area. So the year I got there had to be a concerted effort of how are we going to change that. We also have a very lenient district attorney where we lock them up with guns and they come right out. It's a revolving door. So one of the things that we had to do is, as a leader, you have to be willing to work with outside agencies to be able to focus on who is committing the most violent acts within your community. But also, they have to be held accountable with that. So you have to be laser focused on how we're going to address the gun issue. We created a task force where we actually work with our Attorney General of the state. So we got additional help because it needed to be more than just the men and women of the police department, where we now took these arrests out of the hands of our city district attorney and turned it into, now you're going to do some serious federal time for these same offenses that would have been more lenient. So I think when you create a more focused effort on those specific offenders and broadcasting that information, because honestly, criminals don't respect state time. They don't respect it. What they do fear is Fed time. So you have to get those parties involved, which I know that Kansas City is doing. But there has to be that focused effort in order to reduce those types of offenses.
I wanted to say lastly, I believe that the person you would be working with, who is the Jackson County prosecutor, is an individual named Jean Peters Bakers. Quite frankly, I'm going to say the term man of the people, she's a lady of the people. Like recently, the individual, Reed, who caused an accident, who caused a little girl to have permanent injuries for the rest of her life. She is someone who does stand up more for the community, for the people. So I do wish that that would be the case of what you're saying. That a new procedure, a time for change, and you would help initiate that change in procedure and policy and policing, and that things would be better. It would be better.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Our next question is coming from Vince Magers.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for your interest in serving our city.
Thank you.
My question is, what would you do specifically to improve public transparency for KCPD?
So, as I stated before, if I'm not willing to call it out, I can't be transparent. You know, I can't consider myself transparent if, when we're committing mistakes, we're not acknowledging those errors. And there has to be policies and practices in place in reference to that. Obviously, I would have to conduct a extensive review of what the policies and practices are within the agency. Sometimes the practices are put in place not even understanding the outcome of hiding transparency. And what I mean by that is sometimes agencies have policies that have been in place maybe for 5 years, where the issues of 5 years ago are not necessarily considering the issues of today. So you have to look into the transparency aspect of the policies as well. But when your errors are egregious, you got to call them out. And I just told you, if I'm not willing to tell the people of Kansas City who I'm serving, we made a mistake, am I worth being up here? And that's honest. But there's also changes that are going to have to be made. And when officers make a mistake of the head or a mistake of the heart, we need to be able to differentiate between the two. Was the actions of this officer something that had to do with training? Or was this action of the officer something that had to do with an ill intent? And sometimes, you really have to you weigh that out when it comes to making decisions and things of that nature. But you also have to let the public know when we've made a mistake. Now, some city attorneys may not like that, but it's the truth when it comes to being transparent, and I believe in that. So I hope that answers your question.
Our next question comes from, please forgive me if I mispronounce your name, Nigella Sullivan. Oh, okay. Did I say it right? I didn't. Because you didn't spell it right.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. So my question is, what plans do you have to address school shootings?
Okay. Good question. That's what I'm talking about, somebody who's thinking real about the young people. So when it comes to school shootings, it is happening too often, honestly. One of the things that we have to put in place, every student should be made to feel as though they're safe in their environment. We really should. And if I am correct, you all are looking for a new leader, a chief of your school?
District superintendent, yes.
Okay. So one of the things that I would do is I would have to have a hard conversation with that superintendent so that we can put things in place to make sure that our young people feel safe. We need to make sure that we have, and I know you all have a tip line and texting and all of those good things, but you all need to understand as young people that we are available for you, that you should not feel afraid with that. We need to ensure that our resource officers are actively engaging our young people, not in the negative aspect. I know a lot of them are doing great work, but I want them to do even better. And making sure that they're communicating with you all. Hey, how you doing? How you feeling today? Is everything all good? If not, I need to know about it. What are you seeing? What are you not seeing? These things are important. There also needs to be visibility, and that's something that would have to be reevaluated as well. Is there anything that we're not doing as an agency to ensure your safety other than the school resource officer? Is there anything we can do more of? Is there anything in terms of maybe even spot inspections that an additional officer can show up and just walk through the school just to say, hey, you know what? This school is in my location of work. This is in my zone. I'm just going to stop in and say hey to the principal. These are things that maybe we need to do better. Not to say that they're doing a bad job, but we have to ensure that you feel safe in what you do. But we need to make sure that we engage with you as well. I think far too often we as police departments across the country, we wait too late to engage the young people in their educational years. By the time they get to high school and middle school, they kind of already have their mind set on where they are in terms of how they feel with policing. They either like you or they don't. I think we need to make sure that there is certain follow-through that we as a department have with you all to make sure that you all feel safe. So my job is to make sure that that happens and make sure that you have what you need. So does that answer your question? If not, let me know.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
There is a survey that if you shoot this QR code with your camera, or you can go to www.surveymonkey.com. It's long, you have to look at it. I think there's some sheets around here. In fact, on your way out the door, we would like to have your feedback. Thank you. No, it's not a phone number, but we thank all of you for coming, all that have tuned in on our Facebook Live and our YouTube channel, and that completes our event today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Bishop.
Always a pleasure.